Enitech President Antwine Jackson joins us this week to talk some big news from Microsoft and NinjaRMM, and 5 ways Kaseya VSA users are keeping their customers running, plus a deep dive on the Kaseya breach and its implications with Huntress CEO Kyle Hanslovan. It's ChannelPro Weekly number 192, the Noah's Ark Approach. Hello and welcome to ChannelPro Weekly episode 192. My name is Matt Whitlock, technology editor, online director, and your host of this fine program for people like you. And who are people like you? Well, you are the VARs, the IT integrators, the managed services providers, the IT consultants, the system builders, the server maintenance people, any of those things, and a lot of other things as well. If that describes you, then you are in the right place. If you operate a water slide at a local water park for those young and old alike, I'm glad you're here anyway, because that sounds like it'd be pretty boring, and we are much more interesting than people going down the slide. So welcome one and all. Glad to have you here. Joining me each and every week is my cohort here at ChannelPro, the man of the hour, the guy who makes ChannelPro really work the way it does, executive editor Rich Freeman.
See, what I thought you were going to say, Matt, is if you operate a water slide, you're welcome to stick around and listen to the program, but we want a free pass on the water slide.
I think if you pay the park, you know what, I want free park admission, because if you pay the park admission, they're going to let you go on the slide for free, I would assume, right? Or have you ever been to a water park that like charges per slide?
I don't think I've been to a water park, to be quite honest. So I don't know how the pricing works.
Even Little Rich, long ago, back in the day, you've never been on a water slide?
Well, no. I mean, not like a proper, like the kind you get at these big summer destination places. No. Rich,
I almost feel sad for you. That's a bummer. You know what? I think the next time you come to Illinois, see, we have water parks all around Illinois, because in the Midwest people are nuts and we like water parks. And we also live very close to Wisconsin Dells, which is like the water park capital of the world. I think we're going to have you in the summer. Rich, we're going to take you on your first real water slide.
And I know you well enough, Matt, to know that you will take a lot of photographs of that and put them online. So
yes, I will. Well, that's awesome.
Why I have a picture of me standing next to an 8-foot tall hog at a hockey game, is because Matt saw that opportunity. Yeah, so you have listeners, you have something to look forward to. Someday there will be a picture of me face first headed down a water slide.
This is going to be great, and I have at least a year to plan this, so it's going to be awesome. So, Rich, thanks for being here as always. We weren't on last week, and we have a guest host, by the way, and I can't wait to get to him. But I want to wrap up a couple of things. So we were not here last week. We were busy. Rich, what were we doing?
We were in Atlanta, Georgia, doing our latest ChannelPro SMB forum event, and it's also our latest hybrid forum event here in 2021, this sort of transitional year, heading away from the pandemic, heading back towards the way things always were before. We are giving people the option of being in the room physically with us or watching virtually, and that's what we were doing last week. We had a show for folks in the Southeast, had a lovely audience with us at the hotel in the conference room, and some other folks watching online. And
we had hot food. Because I remember when we were in Dallas, we weren't able to do like a buffet lunch because they wouldn't let us or something like that. But like we had real food at this event. It was great.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. You're right. And you're right. It was. It didn't occur to me actually until right now, because at breakfast there was a buffet, but sort of like in Dallas, they had to serve it to you. Like they didn't want you touching the cutlery or whatever. But at lunch, it was just serve yourself, wasn't it? Or am I?
No, they had servers there for a while, and then at some point, people, I don't know, they disappeared, and then people just started doing it themselves, the way God intended. So Rich, it was a great show. Any highlights that came out of it? We had a lot of good sessions. You want to talk about that for a second?
Well, I will do that quickly, because it's worth mentioning that we have more of these hybrid events coming up, specifically September, October, and November. September will be in Boston, October will be in Raleigh, North Carolina, and November will be in Los Angeles, Southern California. So yeah, we had a session on maximizing cloud margins. We had one about zero trust security, which was very well received. It's one of those terms people hear a lot, but it's like, what does that really mean? How do I put it into action? We spoke about that. We had a great session that our colleague Colleen Fry led about the so-called new normal MSP. What does it look like to be an MSP in the era of hybrid or work from home, et cetera? What did we learn during the pandemic that has changed or can change the way MSPs do business? And then our good buddy and sometimes co-host on this podcast, Manuel Palachuk, did part 3 of his 6-part series about building a strategic roadmap for your MSP. And he'll be doing parts 4, 5, and 6 September, October, November.
Yeah, it was great stuff. A lot of good content. Nice seeing actual human beings in a room together. Everyone showered that morning, which was also good. So hopefully we see everybody out. If you're in the Boston area in September, we definitely want to have you there. And if and if you live in the Raleigh area, like our guest host, you might be able to meet him as well. And who is that? Well, he is the president and founder of Enitech, a Raleigh, North Carolina-based managed services firm. He has over 15 years of experience in the IT service industry and has been featured in the Triangle Business Journal and ChannelPro magazine for his success as a technology entrepreneur. He also holds a 4th-degree black belt in the martial art of Taekwondo and is a former U.S. National and U.S. Open medalist. So don't piss him off. Please welcome Antwine Jackson. Welcome, Antwine.
Thank you. I'm very happy and excited to be here.
It's great to have you on. It's actually shocking that we're in 192 of these and we haven't had you here yet. So long overdue, and we're excited to have you here. So for those who may not know you, tell us a little bit more about you and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm based out of Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm a North Carolina native. Spent most of my life here. After college, I worked for a small MSP, and then about 10 years later, I decided, it was time for me to kind of take my own path and have my own journey, and formed Enitech roughly about 7 years ago, almost 8 years ago now. And yeah, it's been very rewarding, very exciting. It's so funny, when you first get out there, you're like, yeah, I'm gonna take on the world. I'm so ambitious. I'm gonna be the biggest, the greatest, the baddest. And then you realize that it's actually a harder grind than that, actually, and you have to deal with employees, you have to deal with running the business aspect of it. And I wish in college I had paid attention to more of those business classes and those econ classes, because it probably would have benefited me more today than ever. But no, it's been a very rewarding journey. But we work in the SMB space, just as probably many of the listeners are a part of. And yeah, it's really cool to be here.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of folks find, especially those who have technical backgrounds and know a lot of technology, find that when you try to run off and do it yourself, you have to be just as business savvy as you are technically savvy, which makes being an MSP very challenging, as you've probably discovered.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, you really have to tune into those soft skills. Lucky for me, I think I'm cool sometimes. So I think it really kind of played to my favor. But yeah, I mean, and obviously, we wouldn't be where we are today if it wasn't for our service delivery team and really the smart people behind me. So
tell me a little bit about kind of what your catalyst was. So you said you're working for the small MSP, and then you're like,
yeah,
you know what, I want to do it myself. Like what prompted that? Like what made you say, forget this, I'm doing it my own?
Yeah. So, so obviously during that time, we had the recession, and that particular MSP had went through some cash flow issues. And, I'm a loyal guy that pretty much will ride it until the wheels fall off. So the wheels were starting to come off. I went 4 months without a paycheck. And my now wife, but girlfriend at the time, kind of said, look, if I'm going to support us and, make sure that we're making, our rent and mortgage payment, I'd rather you be chasing your own dreams than someone else. So that was really the ultimate catalyst that really kind of started my journey. And, I honestly couldn't have done it without my supportive wife, who's not a listener. So I'm not trying to get any brownie points just yet, but I will play this back for her. But yeah, but no, really, that was the true catalyst. And then, before I had any clients, one of the things is, it's scary out on your own, especially when you're working under such a great mentor and someone who has taught you pretty much everything you know about the industry. I spent the first year attending conferences and going to events, and that is really where I got my MSP education, right? And meeting other partners, talking to other people in the industry and space. And, 2020 was tough because that is literally what I really enjoy doing, is going to conferences and talking and engaging with other people that are in the same boat as I am, and even people that are having more success than I am. So 2020 was tough, not being able to have those in-person events. And, we're very excited to be back, and we're excited to have the opportunity to continue that networking journey.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Would be a real catalyst to kind of do it on your own, not getting paid. That would piss me off too. So, and who knows what it is for some people. Sometimes we use as simple as something like, Bobby kept stealing my sandwiches from the refrigerator, so I was just done with it. So tell me, okay, so you spun off on your own. You started doing the hard work. How long did it take to get your first sale, and what was that like when you got your first sale?
Yeah, so I've been a real believer in, if you build it, they will come, right? Perception's reality, right? So first thing we did was, we really focused on getting ingrained in our community, joining our local chamber, investing in marketing. I had literally one client that paid me like $1,000 a month, and that was it. And, so I was already in the hole, right? And this is where the supportive spouse really helped out. But, probably it took us, luckily I was pretty well connected, and I had a pretty good networking base. But before I had that first big, all right, I got my first deal under the belt, it took about 7 or 8 months. And it was a grind. It was a lot of no's before yeses. And I think, honestly, for me, it's more about taking adversity, looking it in the face, and maybe also being hard-headed and just telling myself, hey, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. So, and it's tough out there. And even during the pandemic, when we had all this time of uncertainty and unknown, I went back to some of those core beliefs, like telling my team, hey guys, we're going to get through this together. We're going to grind through this. But yeah, it took quite a bit of time to really get that first sale. And then once we got that, then it became easier, because obviously we got referrals, we kind of got a sales process together, but it's always been a work in progress, so.
So did you find that it was easier to get people to sign the contract when you threatened them with Taekwondo?
It's really funny you say that. Yeah, so actually one of my first early clients was my Taekwondo coach. He was like, hey, actually we have these computers at all our different locations. Can you manage our network? And of course I was like, absolutely, coach. But no, I think it was fascinating, because when I first started, and this was before the real true birth of Enitech, I was still kind of on the tail end of competition. So it would be tough to go meet with a client. And then of course I have a black eye or an injury, and they're like, oh my gosh, what, are you doing Fight Club on the weekends? Then I have to explain, yeah, actually I'm trying to make this Olympic journey. So there's definitely been a lot of tenets and lessons from the art and sport of Taekwondo that I've applied to business. And I think a lot of it's that no quit attitude. I had a really tough coach. I had medaled at the US Open, 2007, and I was the only American to medal in my division, which I thought was a great accomplishment. So, I'm super excited, super proud. And my coach is like, yeah, that's okay, but you kind of have a consistent thing where you only get third place. And I don't know if there's something wrong with your DNA or something wrong with your work ethic. And that just really fired me up, right? So I've always kind of had this, this isn't good enough. I have to keep going for more. And it's all really about trying to be 1% better. And that's really what I strive to do. That's what my team strives to do, is we try to be 1% better than our peers. And I think that's the difference between first place, second place, and bronze, which I'm a serial bronze medalist. I've said it here.
And were you competing or trying to get on the Olympic team?
Yeah, so that was one of my initial goals. I actually tried to make the U.S. national team to go to World Championships. So I got a chance to actually participate in a national team selection camp. I made the C team there. But yeah, that was one of my goals. It was something that I really dedicated a lot of my life to, and and really, the competition part was the part I really enjoyed, traveling and getting an opportunity to compete against some of the world's best and some Olympians, I've had a chance to be in front of and, lose honorably too. But I think the really big part of it has been more of the preparation, training 3 hours a day, you know, every day, and training sometimes 9 hours. And when you're at the Olympic Training Center, you train for breakfast, you train for lunch, you train for dinner. So, you know, having that, you know, that work ethic is really the one thing that I think that really helped me build, you know, as a competitive Taekwondo practitioner. But that was like 50 pounds ago. So.
Well, you know, there are aspects of your story, the launch of your company, that are absolutely classic ChannelPro stories, and I mean, it goes all the way back to the original and continuing mission of the magazine, that there are so many people out there who made the decision, I'm going to go into business for myself, which in and of itself, in my mind, is like commendable. It takes courage to decide, I'm going to step out. And in your case, of course, you weren't drawing a paycheck. It was a little bit easier, but for a lot of people to step out of a job where they are getting paid and go on your own, and you've never done this before, it's a really hard thing to do. And you know, the typical profile is, I've got the technical skills, I don't know the first thing about running a business, and you've got to like learn it on the job. And that, you know, this is what we sort of created ChannelPro to do, is to help the people who are kind of making it up as they go along a little bit, you know, help them share advice and thoughts with peers, and learn from experts, and all of that. And the other thing that struck me, and I know this is going to sound self-serving to the audience, because we were just talking about how we do conferences at ChannelPro, but I've been saying truly for years and years that the most successful ChannelPros I know are people who go to conferences. And I mean, it's hard to do, because you've got to make time for that, and you're working long hours, and you're putting out fires. And I mean, I totally get it. It's not an easy thing to set that time aside. But really, the people who do learn so much from that, you know, that investment of time, that I really have long felt that's, you know, a huge ROI. But as hard as that is to do, you got to figure out a way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think honestly, when you're isolated and you're working, just with your team, and you're that leader, and you're that person that they're looking to steer the ship, sometimes you need a way of, you need that North Star, right? You need that map, you need that way of making sure you're plotting the correct course. And honestly, going to conferences really helps that, because yes, of course, you're going to get those presentations on, how to, sell cloud, and of course, zero trust, applications and solutions. But more importantly, you get to talk to someone of a similar size, in some cases of a larger size. So you really get a chance to see the context of like your growth potential. You get to see things that people have done that they said, hey, do not take this path. So you really get an opportunity to not always have to reinvent the wheel. And that's through peers, and that's through, peer groups. And I think that attending conferences has definitely been the biggest asset that has helped us grow, because I'll be honest, I tell my team this all day, like, look, I don't have all the answers. I'm figuring it out just as you are. So.
And I will say, because we do virtual conferences at ChannelPro, and like I said, we're doing hybrid conferences where there's a virtual element. You can get a ton out of an online conference. But it has been nice being reminded in recent weeks, as I'm starting to go to the face-to-face conferences, that it is difficult to recreate that hallway conversation element, at the in-person conferences. And like you're saying, I mean, that's a hugely valuable part of the experience.
Yeah, and it's also, as you said, Rich, it's really hard to make the time, because they're always so busy. And they're working the long hours. You said they're putting out fires. And imagine the MSPs that are also volunteer firefighters, because they're putting out fires, and then they're also putting out fires. That's got to be really hard. But if for those who are listening, the look on Antwine's face was absolutely like, did he actually just say that? Like, that's just.
I was thinking to myself, do I bail him out there? Do I just yeah, I think
no, you just let me hang out there to dry. So that was well played, sir. Well played.
I'm not a firefighter, so I didn't know if it was my responsibility to save you, to get you out of that tree. But hey, I'm here. You let me know.
Okay, so I want to know, folks out there who are listening or watching, if you are also a volunteer firefighter, let me know, because then I won't be crazy and that you actually exist. At least one. Somebody save me there, please. All right, Antwine, awesome to have you here. It's an awesome story. We've got stuff on ChannelProNetwork.com about you and where they can go and learn. And you've been part of a lot of our events, so you can go and check that stuff out as well. So it's great to have you here, and I love that you're on. And we got you for the whole show, so it's gonna be very, very well, almost the whole show. We'll get to that later. But we've got a great show ahead as well. So a little rundown of what we're going to be doing. So Microsoft is in the news. So we're going to be talking about them. We got a couple stories from NinjaRMM that we're going to talk about. We're going to be talking a lot about the Kaseya VSA breach and what's going on with that. So we've got a story there that we'll discuss. We've got an interview coming up with Kyle Hanslovan from Huntress. We're also going to be talking about the Kaseya VSA breach, kind of the implications and kind of how you can avoid being swept up in the next major attack. And of course, we'll break down the show at the end with some regular end of the show features and some fun. So strap in, folks. It's going to be a wild and fun ride. Here we go. Rich, Microsoft has launched something that I'm very interested to learn about. What is it?
Well, so this is the week of Microsoft Inspire, the annual Microsoft Partner Conference. So lots and lots of news coming out of Microsoft this week. The single biggest announcement that they made, and the one that's going to be most relevant and interesting, I think, to our audience, is the launch of a brand new cloud product called Windows 365. And in fact, Microsoft says this is not only a new product, but it's really the birth of a whole new product category, which they're calling the cloud PC. And so Windows 365 is a 100% streamed desktop, virtualized desktop experience. And you can run it. It supports Windows 10. It's Windows 11 ready. They want you to know when that becomes available later. You can run it on a traditional Windows kind of device, but it'll run just as well on an Apple device, a Linux device, a tablet. It syncs up in real time. So whatever you were last doing on one of those devices is immediately available to you on another one of those devices. Obviously, there's a great fit for this product in the current era of computing, where we have so quickly moved to that anytime, anywhere, highly mobile kind of scenario where people are working in the office, they're working from home, they're working from coffee shops or wherever. This is a very, very nice fit for that. And I'm just kind of looking at some of the information here that they sent over. There will be 2 editions of the product when it launches. And this is actually very reminiscent. If folks who remember the launch of Office 365 will maybe remember this naming convention. There will be Windows 365 Business and Windows 365 Enterprise. So Windows 365 Business, I think it's safe to say, is sort of the SMB SKU. That's kind of how it worked with Office 365 back in the day. I don't know a lot about what else is different about those 2 bundles, what you get with the enterprise package that maybe you don't get with business. One of the things that's interesting about the product is that they are going to make it very, very easy for you to scale your cloud PC to your needs and to adjust that scale. So if you are somebody who is doing a lot of very IO intensive kind of work, and your initial choice in terms of the capacity that you get with your cloud PC, if it doesn't turn out to be adequate to your needs, it'll be relatively simple to step up and add capacity. If you've got more horsepower of various kinds than you need, I'm sure you'll be able to step back down. They actually have a service that's going to kind of help you not only identify and deal with performance bottlenecks and so on, but can actually kind of provide some advice on sizing the cloud PC properly to what you do. They're calling that, well, actually the service that monitors performance and gives you information about connections and how to optimize those is called Watchdog. That's a brand new service from Microsoft, but they also have endpoint analytics that'll kind of help you optimize.
Does it have a graphic, the cute little search doggy from Windows XP? Is that who the Watchdog is?
You know, there is no picture yet, so I don't know. But boy, that's a natural. Yeah,
they had him in a crate all this time just to bring him back. Now, if Clippy returns, then
I was just gonna say, yeah, maybe Watchdog is Clippy's dog. I don't know. Now, the inevitable question, my first question when I read about this is, well, okay, a complete virtualized Windows desktop. don't they have that already? It was called Windows Virtual Desktop. They renamed it Azure Virtual Desktop recently. Isn't that already available? So this product is for a slightly different use case. And the way Microsoft says it is, if you need more customization, you need more flexibility, you really need to be able to tailor that virtual desktop to a particular customer or a particular user scenario, you're going to want to go with Azure Virtual Desktop. That's where you're really going to have your hands on the controls to create exactly the virtual desktop that you want. If you're looking for something that's a little bit more off the shelf, though, and a lot easier to roll out and easier to support, et cetera, Windows 365 is going to be a great option. And in particular, I think from Microsoft's perspective, what's going to be really exciting about this is that this is essentially an Azure Virtual Desktop option for people who don't have access to an IT department or an MSP. So that's what they're really excited about. Is you know, I don't have anybody who can roll this out for me. Now you don't need that. You can just go straight to Microsoft and get it from there. But they emphasize that this is very much a partner opportunity as well. And so this is not, you know, something that they're going to be pushing direct to their customers. This is an opportunity for you. And if you are a ChannelPro who has interest in Azure Virtual Desktop, but doesn't have a lot of desktop virtualization experience, and that has maybe made you hesitant to start introducing this to your customers, this is potentially an appealing option for you as well. Here's a way to get into that VDI kind of solution without necessarily knowing a ton about VDI yourself.
I've got like 8 trillion questions on this. I want to turn it over to Antwine first. What do you think, Antwine?
I mean, I think that this is, you know, another kind of evolution of Microsoft. I think it's a game changer in a lot of ways, especially coming off of the pandemic and how the remote worker and this virtual worker is a thing that's not going away. I think this is going to open the floodgates for a lot of MSPs who have partnerships with, you know, the Ingram Micros, the Packstates, those distribution, you know, giants, to have an opportunity to have that one man shop or that one, you know, that 2-3 person, you know, company have an affordable solution, essentially that they probably couldn't offer before. And, you know, I think MSPs should be ready to embrace this. I mean, this is no different than Office 365 and retiring those legacy Exchange servers. I think that cloud is here to stay. And I think that it is going to be, you know, this is the next evolution of that. And it definitely makes sense for a lot of partners, as you said, Rich, are hesitant to kind of get their feet wet. The barrier of entry is going to get a lot more accessible for everybody. So
this is a completely off online streaming experience. What happens if is there any offline capabilities to this at all, or does it just revert back to whatever OS the host device is running?
I mean, great question. I don't have like deep technical details for you, but there is, based on the one write-up that I have here about it, there is an offline experience. And Microsoft being Microsoft, you know, they tend not to be excited about scenarios where the endpoint is like doing nothing. They like to kind of take advantage of the processing power at the edge and so on. And, you know, the way they describe this solution suggests that that's part of how they architected this as well. So I don't know a lot about that, but yeah, I'm absolutely certain that there is an offline experience here as well.
Yeah, I think the offline experience will be critical because, I mean, look at when we had the, you know, Office 365 outages, you know, how disruptive that was for, you know, a lot of clients impacted by that, which is pretty hefty number if you think about it.
Well, that's interesting, Rich, because you said it's streamed from the cloud. That tells me that the horsepower is in the cloud. It's running in the cloud. How could there be an offline experience in that scenario?
Well, I mean, there are, you know, you think about, and I don't, you know how this works behind the scenes, but like, you know, you think about Google Workspace. And I hesitated because they keep changing the name of what's the latest name of that? It's now Google Workspace. To a limited extent, there's an offline element to that, like for Gmail, I believe, and maybe 1 or 2 other pieces of that, where you can get a certain amount of work done, even if you're not connected to the cloud. So I don't know if it'll be I don't know if it'll be a similar sort of experience where you don't get 100% of the desktop if you're offline, but you get enough to kind of get things done. If it'll be, I mean, maybe, and again, I'm just kind of spinning my wheels here, but maybe it'll be akin to the offline experience with Office 365 in a sense, where
maybe,
you're doing
but that's an application though. We're talking about the OS, right? Like without the desktop, there's no functionality. Is my thinking, right? Antwine, how does Windows Virtual Desktop work in that way?
Yeah, so I mean, what I'm more, interested in kind of understanding too is, like you said, it's at the OS level. So are they going to have some type of application that has this container? Because what happens when I decide to, scratch two pennies together and fly Frontier, which has no internet service, and I need to get work done, I am interested to kind of see, like, how do you still work? I mean, I guess at the end of the day, I'm working off my Surface Book right now. So would I just continue to operate off of that? I know with the current virtual desktop experience, you don't have internet, you don't have a virtual desktop, right? Because it lives and breathes in the cloud. So, I'm optimistic that, the people at Microsoft are going to figure something out, but I think it's probably, in my opinion, going to be very similar to the current VDI experience, which basically means if you're not talking to the internet, you're not talking to your desktop and it's down. But
that's my guess as well. That's my guess as well, that if you're not online, you're going to, you can basically work on whatever the current device is running. Because what they're saying is this is device agnostic, whether you're on Linux, whether you're on iOS, most likely, or an Android device or whatever. Like if you don't have connection, you can use whatever the device offers until you can reconnect. And then you can, so there's a couple of interesting questions that come to mind. Like, how does this play with desktop windows, right? So you're saying when you're in the cloud, right, and you are on your Android device and you connect to your Windows Virtual Desktop or Windows 365, whatever it is, the thing running in the cloud, you do stuff, you leave an application window open, and then you go to another device and you log back in. Is everything exactly how you left it? Just like if you...
Yeah, if you don't, as long as you don't disconnect that session or shut that device down, or that session down. Yeah, and we have clients that do it all the time, where they'll be working in the middle of a Word document, they'll leave and go back to a different device and pick up where they left off. The downside of that is if we ever have to do like an update or push something out that would cause us to reboot the server, that information is lost in those sessions. So I'm hoping Microsoft has thought through that particular end user experience, because you're right. Those are definitely going to be some challenges that will have to be addressed. I mean, it's no different than what, is the status quo, but I do think that, it's something that we're still having, issues navigating through, or the end user will at least. So.
Right. And is there any interaction or play with Windows Desktop, right? Like, can I use an actual Windows computer running Windows, right? And then can that sync with my virtual desktop? So if I leave my Windows Desktop and go into my virtual desktop, it's the same? Or is this all just cloud hosted?
Or is it like, OneDrive, right? Where in some capacity, I can still work on things local to my machine. And then obviously once I connect back to the internet, that handshake reoccurs and we're syncing data again, So that's going to be a trick and something to really think about. Also, what kind of sync errors are we going to run into, or sync issues? So,
right, because they got a great history with perfect sync clients.
100%,
Doesn't something,
yeah.
That's fine.
no downtime, no nothing. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. So, Rich, there's a lot of questions. I guess one of the more obvious questions that we didn't get to yet is, did they talk about pricing?
No. There was nothing in there about that. And I should say the release date on this is August 2nd. So they sort of pulled the curtain back this week. It doesn't actually become available for a couple of weeks or so yet.
And normally if they don't mention pricing, it's usually free, right? And that's the way I've always interpreted that. Okay.
We're talking about the same company, right?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Yeah.
Right. Free for all. You heard it here first. Yeah. It is. So, all right. So, Antwine, let's talk pricing. How much is too much?
Man, I don't know if I'm equipped to answer that question. I mean, how much is too little? I mean, I'll throw a question back at you. I don't know. I think you start to get to 50, 60 bucks a seat kind of situation. I mean, now you're kind of up there with, VDI and what other people are doing as their own, solutions, at least from a cost perspective from the MSP side. So, I don't really, I hope it's substantially less than that, because, that's obviously going to turn some heads to people, but it also may help the MSP that is selling the VDI solution, letting their client understand that, hey, this stuff's actually really expensive. Like, it's not free as you expect it to be. So I could see both angles to that.
Yeah, Rich, you said that the environment's configurable to a degree. So I assume that the resources you pay for is going to impact the pricing. But I have to imagine they have to find a balance between, well, like, why would I spend $900 a year when I could get a decent computer with running Windows for $700 and use it for 3 years, right? There's got to be a compelling argument to be made, right?
I mean, I would assume, so if you have an employee who needs a decent desktop and they do all their work at that desk, then this is probably not actually going to pencil out right. I've got to assume, given the fact that you can stream this to all sorts of different kinds of devices and locations, this is going to be something that makes sense for people with more mobility, more of that hybrid kind of work need. So yeah, I'm sure there will be plenty of Windows users out there for whom this really, doesn't.
Well, I think this also will be perfect for the bring your own device crowd, right? Because that's one of the biggest challenges with a lot of corporate IT is that, especially in the cybersecurity landscape, having, that sense of corporate control over a device you don't have ownership of. So I think that also can really benefit a lot of corporations that don't have the budget to spend $1,500 to $3,000 on a corporate laptop for an employee, especially like small startups. So,
yeah, good point. Very good point. The other thing I was thinking about real quick, and then I'll throw this out there and then we'll move on. What are the OEMs going to think of this, right? Because it seems like you could really stretch using old hardware if it's not really doing anything, right? So long as it boots and you can connect to your virtual desktop, which is where all the resources are, it seems like this could be bad for the computer industry, because now we could have a life cycle of maybe it was 4 years for a desktop before it kind of became slow and unusable. Well, now it could be 8 years, right? As long as it turns on. What do you think? Could it be bad for MSPs and at least those in hardware?
Well, I mean, I think the writing's been on the wall that there is no real, you're not going to get rich selling hardware. And I think anybody that's thinking that in 2021, they really need to go to more conferences and talk to other partners and try to get that paradigm shift. But I think that one thing it will do is probably you're going to invite more clients that go to Sam's Club or Best Buy and they buy the least expensive laptop as possible and they really, go dirt deep on the specs. I think you're going to invite more of that. I still think from the MSP perspective, it's still opportunity, because now what you can do is you have a little bit more elasticity in your budgeting for some certain clients, because clients that you knew that you couldn't make this hardware sell on because they literally couldn't afford it, you can now do a lower end baseline model, or even in some cases a consumer grade version of that device. So I think that does open up some actual more opportunity in some aspects for MSPs to make money and be able to leverage that market. But since that really cool company Amazon has been out there, consumers are smart. I mean, they're educated. They're more educated than they've ever been when it comes to tech. So I think that MSPs that are looking to get wealthy off of hardware, those days are dead.
Yeah, and I said that was my last question, but I lied. I got one more. So is this Windows 365 from an MSP perspective just as manageable as any other endpoint? Like, are you still able to tack on your additional services, and does it still need all the maintenance that a regular Windows desktop needs?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm sure, at some point, and obviously I'm probably jumping the gun on this, but you're still, even though, yes, it's in the Microsoft cloud, and yes, it's probably going to be, backed up and it's supported by that infrastructure, I don't think Microsoft's going to roll back the whole organization if Susan accidentally deletes her Excel sheet from the accounting department, right? So I think you're still going to want to have some sense of hedging your bets when it comes to backup opportunities there. And then, of course, at the end of the day, you still can't combat against user error. You still have to have a way to combat against ransomware. There's probably a way to even get endpoints involved in that aspect of it. And I mean, when Office 365, first made its debut, I know a lot of MSPs who were used to being, the gatekeeper for that on-premise Exchange server, they were worried. But now clients pay you to manage that Office 365 tenant because at the end of the day, they rather be focused on running their business than handling those IT aspects of it. I mean, we have a Google Workspace, or G Suite or whatever name it'll take tomorrow. We have our client, one of our larger clients that's on that platform. And we are responsible for managing those emails when employees are cycled in and out of the organization. So I think that opportunity is still going to happen because you still got to provision. So I think for MSPs, it's going to create more opportunity.
Excellent. And I'll just read you verbatim from this blog post about the system. What they have to say about management, which for obvious reasons kind of tilts heavily towards their own management tools. But we built Windows 365 to be consistent with how you manage your physical devices now. Your cloud PCs show up right alongside your physical devices in Microsoft Endpoint Manager, and you can apply management and security policies to them just as you do all your other devices. And by the way, Microsoft Defender, their security tool, runs on the cloud PC as well as a physical PC.
Yeah, right. So I can only imagine you're going to want to still partner with SOC partners such as Huntress or Rocket Cyber, the many ones out there, just because at the end of the day, that's going to be a part of the threat ecosystem. So
very cool. Well, it'll be interesting to see kind of how it's adopted, how it grows, and we'll learn a little bit more about the pricing. I'm sure we'll probably touch on that again in a future show after it rolls out. But let's move on because we got some more things to talk about, and that's NinjaRMM. So, Rich, we got two NinjaRMM stories. You want to do each one individually, or you want to kind of talk about them together?
Yeah, we can do them individually here. And they won't take an enormous amount of time, but maybe start with the partner program.
Let's start with the partner program.
The folks at NinjaRMM are really pouring some resources into their partner program. Now, you think about it a little bit, and why does an RMM vendor have a partner program, right? I mean, they're selling the tool to you. You're using the solution. I mean, sure, they're going to offer you, resources that are going to help you use the product more successfully and be more successful as an MSP. But this is not that kind of partner program. This is actually a reseller partner program that they introduced earlier on. And the backstory to that essentially is that Ninja has been getting increasing amount, like large and still growing amounts of interest in their product from corporate IT departments, end user IT departments. And we've all heard about the rise of co-managed IT in the last 18 months. All of a sudden, these businesses have people working remotely. They need a tool to manage that. A lot of times they're either partnering with an MSP or outsourcing that work. In other cases, they're doing that work themselves. They need a tool to do that. And so all of a sudden, a lot of these corporate IT departments are in the market for an RMM system, and that has created a resale opportunity for ChannelPros. And so Ninja has a partner program to do this. It was introduced earlier on. It's taking off so quickly at Ninja that they're hiring partner account managers and sales engineers and really kind of investing some money in building this up very quickly. They are eliminating, this is a new policy going into effect here. There used to be some revenue commitments that you had to make as a partner if you joined the program. They're getting rid of those to eliminate that barrier to entry, which if nothing else kind of tells you that what they are primarily looking to do is get as many partners signed up to this program as possible, as quickly as possible to keep up with the demand. We're not going to let revenue commitments, be a barrier to that, essentially. Margins, according to the interview I did with these guys not too long ago, you can earn as a partner reselling the system 20 to 30%, which is certainly not bad. And the last little point I'll make is that literally 2 hours ago, less than 2 hours ago, I was interviewing the CEO of MSP 360, which has, you may know them best still by their former name Cloudberry, but they rebranded as MSP 360 a couple of years ago. They're building out their own sort of managed services tool set, and they just recently got into RMM themselves, and they too are seeing demand for RMM software in IT departments, and they too have a partner program specifically designed to help resellers and MSPs get in on that.
Interesting. Now, Rich, I also see that their partner program has 2 tiers: the red belt tier and the black belt tier. Now, would Antwine get to be black belt just because he already has one?
I would think so. Yeah, I would think. Yeah, he gets grandfathered in at the black belt level, because if he doesn't, he'll kick your behind anyway. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Antwine, good stuff here, right? Like, I think anytime you see partner program changes, usually you want to say that they're changes for the better. I don't see anything here that looks like it's any worse. In fact, if anything, it makes it just more inviting to be a NinjaRMM partner. What do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, I think this is a play from some of the things that telecom's been doing for years with master service agent agreements, where, they're giving MSPs an opportunity to resell, telecom carriers to their clients, but they're actually getting paid by those master agents. And I think it's a great way to create recurring revenue. I mean, if NinjaRMM is going to be billing direct a, corporate IT department, it also really helps the MSP, because that relationship is between the corporate IT and NinjaRMM, and the MSP is compensated from NinjaRMM. So I mean, those are the best relationships in a lot of cases, because at the end of the day, if there's a NinjaRMM issue, the end user is going to reach out to Ninja. I would hope from this particular partner program, based on what I'm reading here. I think that NinjaRMM is tired of being a bronze medalist like Antwine once was when he was younger, and they're trying to get creative, right? They're trying to figure out a way to get this whole other market set without, betraying their MSP partners. And I think that this is a very creative and unique way of doing that.
Yeah, indeed. So, Rich, but this is not the only news that NinjaRMM has. They also have a big update coming that those who are partners who are in the red or black belt tier might be interested in. What is that?
So they've got version 5.2 of their RMM system out there, actually. Second update of the year, actually. But then there are a number of interesting features in here. But the one that really kind of jumps out is that they are adding documentation functionality to the product. So, they're competing with companies like Kaseya, which owns IT Glue, and ConnectWise, which owns IT Boost, and Enable, which owns Passportal. So this has become sort of a table, maybe not table stakes, but close to table stakes kind of thing in the RMM market, that if you are have that kind of product, if you are building out a suite of products, you kind of need to have a documentation system. And this is going to get Ninja into that realm. They are providing it at no extra cost so this is not like an add-on or something that you have to pay for. If you are paying for the RMM system, it now comes with documentation functionality. They emphasize, as you would expect in this case, just because we are now offering documentation doesn't mean that you have to use it. So if you are an IT Glue or a Passportal user, you can continue to do that. Those integrations, will continue to be supported and remain strong, and so on. But this becomes an alternative to you if you want something that is very, very closely woven in with the RMM functionality that you've got. So from a bigger picture standpoint, what's kind of interesting about this is that for a long time, NinjaRMM was really all about the RMM, and you had, they were competing with these companies that were like ConnectWise and Kaseya and Datto, were building out integrated suites of products. And these guys said, we just want to be really, really good at one thing instead of having all these other things. And really just within the last 12 months, now Ninja has a backup product. Now Ninja has documentation functionality. So they're drifting in the direction of a suite as well. And it'll be sort of interesting to see how that kind of continues to evolve from here.
Is this something that like IT Glue should be worried about? Or, what's the motivation for someone who might be well entrenched in IT Glue to look here? for documentation?
Well, I seriously doubt anyone at IT Glue is worried about this right now, just given the position they have in the market and sort of the head start and so on. I mean, it might be, might put them at a slight competitive disadvantage to like future NinjaRMM users and so on. But yeah, I doubt they're too worried about this product. I think this will be, and I'd be curious to get Antwine's perspective on this, but this might be most appealing to a company that is kind of new to documentation, dabbling in documentation, doesn't necessarily want to spend the money on something like IT Glue, but likes to have the benefit of that kind of functionality. And for the same money that they're paying for an RMM, maybe already paying for NinjaRMM, they get that too.
No, I mean, I think you were spot on with that, Rich. I mean, I think for that MSP that's, you know, the one-man show and he's just trying to grind and grow, I think for him, this is going to be a game changer for him, because you're right. Not everybody is comfortable signing a 3-year commitment. Not everybody's comfortable having these minimals, right, and paying X amount of dollars per user. I don't think the IT Glue of the world need to be worried about this per se. I think that if anything, this is just a part of NinjaRMM's evolution. I'm interested and kind of perplexed that they haven't quite yet gotten to the PSA aspect, right? But I think that if anything, this is the path there. I know Datto added documentation to, you know, they added another module to their PSA. I think that, you know, the IT documentation market at some point needs to probably be concerned, because, you know, the PSA, the RMM companies of the world, they want to try to keep they want to bring that back in house as much as they can. And I think that as much of a head start as IT Glue and some of these other vendors have, I think PSA companies are getting smarter, RMM companies are getting smarter. They're understanding that, look, maybe for certain people in the industry, they don't need to have 10 windows open, and they're thinking about how much time can they save them by building some of these things natively into their products. And I know we obviously have that integration piece of it, but I think at the end of the day, these companies are thinking bigger, right? How do we own that MSP's relationship? So I think that NinjaRMM, they're thinking ahead. They're being forward thinking, and they're trying to really leverage their product and solution as much as they can in the MSP space.
Yeah, interesting. Rich, do you think? Trying to think of the best way to ask this question. Did they talk about more of like the features of their documentation solution? Is it somewhat robust, or is it much more basic than what you would expect?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is like the very first version out the gate. So I think, you know, they're kind of making a down payment on what it will ultimately be. But I do think it'll be interesting to see how robust it gets. And I'm thinking this because of what you were just sort of saying, Antwine, and also because of this conversation I had with Brian Helwig at MSP 360 90 minutes or so ago or whatever. And, you know, they just entered the RMM product or market a few weeks ago. And obviously there's a lot of competition that they're up against, but they have at least for now, they have a very particular segment of that market in mind. And it's a market of MSPs who want a tool, are willing to pay for a tool, but aren't ready to go all the way to a full-blown VSA, Datto RMM, ConnectWise, Automate kind of, you know, which can be expensive. In fact, I mean, there are a lot of MSPs out there who are using a free tool of some kind or another right now to run the business. And they know they kind of need to take the next step, but they don't necessarily want to take a big expensive step. And so MSP 360 strategy is we're going to charge you by the admin instead of the endpoint. You're going to pay. And right now, this product is sort of still in the closing stages of being an eval product. So it's free. Anyone can upload it. But when they start charging for it, it's going to be $49 a month per admin, as opposed to, a per endpoint per month kind of fee. And they will proudly tell you that it does less than some of these other RMM products, because we're going after somebody who doesn't want something that complex and doesn't want to pay for something that complex. And so I do wonder if, it was a really intriguing point you made there, Antwine, about documentation. Is there a similar sort of market for documentation where there are people who need that, but only to a point, and they're not necessarily willing to invest, and over time, the availability of a product like NinjaRMM that has that built-in no extra cost documentation does maybe become an issue at a lower end, a smaller end of the MSP market, for some of the documentation companies out there, that kind of less robust but robust enough kind of alternative becomes appealing to a segment of the market.
Yeah, and I also think it's good for them because it allows for them to get a little bit of runway on their R&D process for building out this product. There was a lot of products we used in the beginning where the product wasn't the greatest, but we knew, well, what's the roadmap? All we cared about was the roadmap, and some of them met those roadmap milestones, and others did not. And obviously, we had to shift gears when they didn't. And I think that for these companies that are still very new to the game, they're going to be able to enable some of these MSPs to really go through some of those growing pains with them, but not to a point where they're going to tarnish their reputation per se,
Right. And Antwine, it seems like one of the things I often hear from MSPs and partners is to try and reduce the number of tools you use, because those costs just add up constantly when you're adding this tool and this tool and this tool and dark web and blah, blah, blah. I mean, if you were, are you always looking for a more consolidated suite, or are you always looking for more best in class?
Yeah, the great question. So this is something I literally battle with every day. So, obviously from a, productivity standpoint, the more, the less tools, the better, right? But in this new age of, data breaches and cybersecurity, maybe it's better to diversify across multiple platforms, because I rather have a third of my leg taken out than the whole house coming down in the event of a breach. So I think that, I can argue either way of that. I do think from a, service delivery time per ticket, yeah, you want less tools for sure, because now you are zoned in, and plus you're going to have, an actual cleaner integration, because the tool is going to work natively inside. But I do think for certain products, it is good to have that separation, just because, if one product fails, the last thing you need is to be sitting, dead in the water. One of the things that we do is, even though, yes, we use IT glue, that's what we use personally, but we make sure we also have that documentation in a hard copy, just in case for some reason IT glue is unavailable, because we would be dead in the water without those credentials. My memory's good, but it's not that good.
A lot of printing going on over there at Enitech. Awesome stuff. Well, there's a lot here in this story to look at, and we put links to all the stories that we talk about here on the show on ChannelPro. Well, we put it on the show page at channelpronetwork.com. So go there, find the show page for episode 192, and then you'll get links quickly to all of these different stories. You can go and you can read all of the nitty gritty details, because we're kind of talking about them more at a high level, and to kind of share our thoughts about them. We also, if you're watching on YouTube, we also put the links in the description area there. So if you open up the description area, you'll see the links to all these stories. You can kind of follow along as we talk about it and kind of get all the additional details. But that's going to wrap it up for news. Other than Rich, I honestly, because we didn't do a show last week, I don't think we've actually talked about the fact that there was, something kind of big that happened on July 2nd. Do you want to talk about that? No, let's move on. We won't need to talk about that. No, let's talk about that.
Well, I mean, I think that's actually a segue to the next topic on the show sheet there. I mean, I think, and later on in this show, we're going to talk to Kyle Hanslovan from Huntress, and you're going to get a lot of really good behind the scenes security expert information on what happened there. So we can kind of leave that part of the story to a little bit later on in the podcast. But, we were in Atlanta last week. There were a lot of very smart, experienced MSPs who were speaking for us, or in some cases, exhibiting with us at the show. So I had an opportunity to speak with a number of different people at that show who are VSA users. And, like you said, the attack happened on July 2nd, very deliberately heading into a holiday weekend. Our conference was July 8th. So I'm having these conversations with people close to a week after, VSA goes down, and it was still down at that point. Kaseya has been very careful about making sure they can bring it up again safely, and that process is still sort of ongoing as we record this here. So I started asking people, what in the world have you been doing for close to the last week without an RMM tool? Because it's just not something I've ever had to think about or ever written about in the past. And I've been looking forward to kind of getting Antwine's thoughts on this as well. I mean, obviously, this is the kind of thing that is on your mind, because you've got hard copies of your documentation in case you're without your documentation system. I do wonder, and you'll let us know. I mean, have you ever thought about, anticipated the possibility of being without a tool that important for a week or more, which is kind of a crazy thing? But I spoke to some people. What did you do? What have you been doing? How have you been working with your customers? And I mean, a few common themes emerge. I think what a lot of people have been doing is relying on their remote access solution. And this might be a case, Antwine, where it's beneficial to be working with a different vendor for that, so that if VSA goes down, but you're a TeamViewer guy, you still got access to TeamViewer. But there have been a lot of people who have been using the remote access system to remote into customer endpoints that are in need of service of one kind or another. I spoke with a gentleman named Alper, who is the CEO of a security vendor called CyberGuard 360. But he also, for even longer than he's been in that role, he's been an very successful MSP from back east. And he not only has been relying on the remote control system, but he and his team created this sort of automated installation package. So very early on in the story, he sent an email out to his customers and told them, look, here's what's happening on the RMM system. We're still there for you. If you have a support problem that you think is going to require us to connect with your endpoint, run this package here, which will install the software on your side that we need. Give us a call then, and then we'll connect and we'll be able to take care of you. So that's, how people were able to kind of do RMM-like support functions during that week. Another theme, another piece of that story right there, that is another common theme among VSA users I spoke to, is just a lot of communication, basically. And I think it was especially important in this case because there are issues out there in the world that can affect an RMM tool or some other critical tool that you use that only you will ever know about, right? But in this case, everybody, you turn on the TV or the radio or everybody is reading about Kaseya VSA. And so a lot of VSA users were being proactive about reaching out to their customer and saying, yep, we've been affected by this as well. You have not been impacted from a security standpoint. So you're safe. We've got a way. So getting out in front of that made a huge difference. Another MSP who was at the show, Rick Jordan of Reach Out Technology, said that, maybe 5% of his clients reached out to him with questions and concerns and so on, because he got to them first. And very similar thing with Alpert. Before they were even seeing the headlines in the media, he had already told them, this has happened, here's how we're dealing with it, and you're okay. And so very little pushback, very few complaints, very few concerns. The other thing I'll call attention to, which I thought was interesting, I mentioned Rick Jordan before. He actually has 2 RMM systems. So he had RMM access and the ability to support his customers via RMM because he has a backup RMM tool in place at all times. And obviously that is expensive in a number of different ways. And he says, that's okay. I do it. He also has redundant backup systems in place for a similar kind of reason. I never want a backup to get ransomed, and I don't have any other So he does a lot of things like that cost more. And he, tells his customers, you're paying more for my service than you probably would be with somebody else. But these are the things you need to have continuous availability. And the kind of customers he chooses to sell to understand, if you want a premium service like that, you're going to pay a premium price, and they're willing to do it. So that too is an option and issue. It's something to think about as an MSP. If you're concerned about, oh my God, what would I do without an RMM for days at a time? One answer is make sure you're not without an RMM for days at a time, because you've got another one if you've got to use it.
Antwine, I'm going to turn that over to you. That's an interesting strategy, having backups for everything. That is costly, though. What are some of the things that you would do to kind of keep your customers up and running and satisfied? How do you react in this situation?
Yeah, so I think well, first part is messaging's everything, right? If you panic, the troops panic, and we actually had clients reach out to us asking us, were they impacted by this VSA breach? We actually use NinjaRMM, and many customers had sent us like copies of the articles. And of course, we had to send out a message basically reassuring them that they were not impacted. I did also tell them, yes, we also use Kaseya products, but they were not impacted in this particular incident. I think that, part of the problem has been as MSPs is that we've gotten incredibly reliant on the tools we use, which we should be. But I think we've also become, it's almost like we've forgotten that it's still software, it's still a platform, it's still something that's ran by another company. And when you pick these vendors, you are literally tying your cart to them. So I've always been a big believer in the Noah's Ark approach, two of everything, right? I think that you have to let your clients know those things. So one thing we do is we have like a backup on demand, whether it's TeamViewer or Splashtop option that we deploy to all of our clients, just because there's been RMM outages before where you have those little small windows where things have been down, and it's detrimental to you and your team, especially if your client is experiencing an emergency or a crisis. As far as backup solutions go, we're very transparent with our clients and the type of backups that they decide ultimately to go with. So we start off by telling them, in the event of a crisis, this is what you should expect for downtime. And we add time on top of that to make sure that we're giving them a realistic timeline. I think for something like this, communication's number one. Start by communicating with your clients and maybe going through, and this is also a good opportunity for you to enhance the services that you're currently providing by having just an honest conversation and telling them, look, this data breach, if it's not VSA today, it's something else tomorrow. If it wasn't SolarWinds, end of last year. And I think the moment that all of us can just accept that, look, any one of us could be on the receiving end of this, I think that's the moment that everything's going to improve for everyone. And I think you have to start by educating your client. Once you educate your client of the risk factor, then deploying some of these secondary tools will make the world of difference, especially when you're talking about a service outage. I mean, that's tough.
Two of everything seems like a good strategy. Do you have two microwaves in the break room?
So actually, in our office, we do have two microwaves, only because we just moved and the previous tenant left theirs. So we do have two microwaves side by side, the Noah's Ark approach. We have two refrigerators. One's used more for beers these days. But yes, we double down on everything here at Enitech.
There's nothing better in a break room than not one microwave burrito being cooked, but two at the same time. They come in pairs. No, I mean, it's a sound strategy, right? Have a backup solution for everything. But at what point, not every MSP can do that, right? Or can every MSP do that? Because I'm sitting here thinking like, well, what if I'm small, and what if I don't have the resources to have a continuous, to have two RMM solutions running, or two PSA solutions running, or two documentation solutions running, or two whatever, name.
I totally agree. Right. Absolutely. You're right. It's expensive. And for, a smaller organization, and I still think we're small. I mean, yeah, you're right. It's egregiously expensive. And a lot of clients, honestly, aren't going to want to pay for it because they don't see the value. They see that RMM being down as your problem, not their problem. Right. So one of the things that we did was we use the on-demand service, right? We have like a single TeamViewer license, right? In case of emergency, break glass type of licensing. So what we do is we allow that to be, and yeah, it's going to be like IT was 10 years ago, or when RMM wasn't so, fluent and accessible, where you are going to have to pick up the phone and call your client and have them share that code with you. So, I mean, that's what we're thinking more about, is making sure we have more than one way in, because at the end of the day, I didn't write the software, so therefore I don't trust it, right?
Yeah. And so, Rich, we're going to talk a little bit more about the Kaseya VSA breach, but as you said, Antwine, this didn't really affect you, but you said you had some customers contacting you. What were their concerns? Like, where did they hear about it? Because a lot of end users aren't paying attention.
A lot of the ones was through the national media. And I think that, that is really, and it's twofold, right? That has created probably the most opportunity for any MSP out there today is to really focus on cybersecurity. There's awareness, there's training, right? There are so many partners out there to partner with. This is the time to partner because cybersecurity is not only the low-hanging fruit, but it is the number one thing that is not only keeping the MSP up at night, it's keeping your customers up at night now because they know this thing is finally real, right? And now the customer that just thought that this, router that they picked up at Target, it says the word firewall in there, that's all they need to defend. Now they're starting to understand that actually, no, there's actually multiple layers to this security stack. And, and I think that we also have to be just aware that clients are smart and information is accessible. And clients are now starting to look into the same publications that only you thought you were reading. But yeah, for us, it was national media. That was the way we got tons of articles from the different media outlets, and that's how customers are finding out. So it's an opportunity, and it's also, a chance for you to try to tighten up your security stack, right? That's one thing we've been doing. When this VSA, incident occurred, we put ourselves on notice and we said, look, we need to talk about this as a tabletop exercise. We need to reach out to clients and find out how many of our clients actually have cyber liability insurance. We need to reach out to our insurance people and make sure that they're not just putting this under errors and omissions. So I think that, tabletop exercises and having that internal conversation with your organization gets you ahead of this problem. Because as most people say, right, it's not if, it's when. So.
One last thing, one last interesting observation that I got from the people I spoke to last week about this, and this one came from Lawrence Cruciana, who has been a co-host with us on the podcast before. And, as we said, that the attack was very deliberately timed for the Friday before a holiday weekend here in the US. Lawrence and his company, I should say, don't use VSA, but they support a customer that uses VSA. And so Lawrence and his team are aware that this giant security issue has come up and it has implications for one of his customers. They immediately start reaching out to their contacts at this company, and those folks are all gone for the weekend. And so that the question then arises, well, what's the right thing to do there? Do you keep trying to reach out to the customer until you succeed? In Lawrence's case, they anticipated this kind of thing potentially happening with any of their customers a long time ago. And they actually have built into their standard operating procedures this idea that, as Lawrence put it, there may be times that we ask for forgiveness rather than permission. When they're onboarding a customer, they tell them, look, in this kind of scenario, we're going to do our best to find you and explain what you need to do. But if you're in danger and you can't do it, we're just going to do it for you, even if you haven't given us permission to do that. And that's what they wound up doing in this case. So thinking about that kind of thing, where you're doing something that could really affect a customer's business, but it's very, very much in their best interest. Have you kind of walked through that possibility with your customer and established that kind of process in advance so that you feel comfortable acting that way for them?
Yeah, I totally agree. I believe in that as well. One of the things that we ended up doing for a lot of our customers, especially when a lot of the phishing, campaigns were just getting so aggressive, is we had clients who we went ahead and turned on multi-factor authentication for their Office 365. And we had clients that were really frustrated about that. Now, we didn't cause a work disruption. We sent out numerous, warnings that this was going to happen, but it was something that we no longer could have this, it's a choice thing, right? It is now a need to have. And I'm a firm believer in live to fight another day. Listen, there are things that a lot of people can forgive in this industry, and there are tons of things that people will not. And losing someone's data is unforgivable, right? Major service disruption is unforgivable in this industry, especially because there are so many of us. So I think for us, as we tell all of our clients, I'm always going to put their best interests forward. And I'd rather lose a client in a situation where I know I did the right thing than in a situation where I hesitated because I was afraid of, stepping on toes or, upsetting them in something that actually had a longer term benefit. So I totally agree with that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably a good place to wrap here too, especially with the advice of not stepping on your customers' toes. They don't like that. Their toes, unless they're wearing the steel-toed shoes, then they don't mind. We're gonna pause there, but a great discussion, and there's a lot more in that article for you guys to check out. 5 ways Kaseya VSA users are keeping customers up, running, and satisfied. Definitely go check that out. Use it as kind of a good game plan to think ahead about how you should react in situations like this if you are to be affected by something like this. And as Antwine said, it's not a matter of if, it is a matter of when, because that's just the nature of the beast these days. With that, we're going to take a short break. We've got a great interview coming up with Kyle Hanslovan, the CEO of Huntress. We're going to talk about the Kaseya VSA breach a little bit more, kind of the implications, how it happened. A lot of great information. Unfortunately, we had to record it earlier, so Antwine wasn't able to join us due to some scheduling issues with Kyle. But it's an awesome interview, and Antwine will be back with us on the other side of that. So stick around. You won't want to miss it. We will be right back. On July 2nd, another major cybersecurity incident occurred when hackers compromised a vulnerability in Kaseya VSA that caused widespread downtime for as many as 1,500 companies. The group responsible for the attack claims to have infected over 1 million systems in the process. Now, how exactly could something like this happen? What are its implications? And will it happen again? Here to discuss is Kyle Hanslovan, CEO of Huntress, who has a lot of experience discovering vulnerabilities in Kaseya VSA and other RMM tools. Welcome, Kyle.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you on. Why don't you, if you can, you've been on with us before, but give us a little bit of background about you and about Huntress and what you do there.
So your intro was a little bit more fancier than mine. I tend to joke that I'm the chief janitor at Huntress, meaning I just clean up whatever craziness is going down. But as co-founder and CEO of a company that helps about 34,000 businesses find, detect, respond, and recover from their security incidents, we keep ourselves busy.
So your janitorial, now when you're saying your janitorial duties, you're talking about cleaning up what kind of messes more specifically?
Oh gosh. So in this last week, it's been ransomware, but I think you could say proverbially it has hit the fan and it's just keep getting kind of worse. So the messes range, you could imagine, from the most mundane. If you think about Kaseya, the first Kaseya incident I ever responded to was widespread coin miners. This time, nowadays in 2021, it's usually, how do I get payment even quicker? And Bitcoin is great. Ransomware payments are even better, especially when they're to a tune of, $50 to $70 million, what they're asking for. You could understand that change as well.
Yeah, well, that kind of leads us right in, I guess, to this latest attack with the Kaseya VSA, which was a ransom of, I think they had demanded $70 million for a universal unlocker to unlock it. But you are certainly the most experienced here on the call and about kind of what happened. So kind of take us through this Kaseya VSA attack and what exactly transpired.
Yeah, I'm putting my storytelling hat on right now. And, it was a dark and stormy Friday night, which, by the way, for any of you that are in information security or cybersecurity, you know that every Friday night is a dark and stormy night. That's usually when hackers, especially the cyber criminals, they target when you go home. And so in this particular incident, they waited. They had this actually set up in a timer for 1630 UTC. That's if you follow the time zones, that's roughly for me in Eastern time zone, noon, 1230. So it went off a little bit earlier, but they mass pushed ransomware to a handful of compromised VSA servers to every single machine within every single client. Overall, we would estimate and agree largely with Kaseya's estimates. There's probably, no less than 1,500, but also probably no more than 2,000 total companies. That looks like about 50 to 60 managed service providers who were impacted. And you could probably do just a little bit of math and start, estimating of, okay, if it really is that many companies, how many endpoints? So even though we don't believe that the Revol team behind this act truly knew how many endpoints they compromised, it doesn't take a whole lot of math to start figuring out what you might truly have impacted. So yeah, that's what we've been dealing with since, July the 2nd.
So Kyle, when I spoke with Kaseya back over the 4th of July weekend, actually, they were they had very clear, complete information about exactly what happened. There was only so much of it that they could share, though, because the FBI was conducting an investigation. They had to kind of withhold some details. I'm curious if you can share any detail. All I know is Kaseya said this was not just somebody clicking on a phishing link. This was a quote unquote incredibly sophisticated attack. They said they used that exact wording multiple times. Can you shed any light on how these attackers got into VSA and what they did once they were there?
Yeah, I know your audience both appreciates the business angle and the technical angle. So I'll weave those stories together. When we got our first notifications, both from our product and actually some of our clients, we just knew multiple MSPs were getting ransomed all over the place. Thank goodness we reached out to the executive team that we had relationships with at Kaseya. They called us probably in about 15 minutes. We were on our team plus their product and customer support team talking through, making the decisions. And on the phone is when the decision was made. Kaseya team made the decision to take down the SaaS background or take down the SaaS product of VSA. And so that was going on in the background while we were walking through, sharing new information we learned. But the stuff that's probably most interesting to your readers is not the whole timeline. How did the phone calls play out? It's probably how the heck did the attack work? And our team at Huntress has fully recreated the full exploit. So as far as I'm aware, we're the only people who've recreated it outside of the Kaseya engineers. And so the interesting piece is that word sophisticated. Sometimes companies use that word sophisticate to mask like, nobody wants to be compromised by a mundane attack, right? They want to get hit by the most sophisticated actors. That way it helps, give some credence. But in this case, it's actually kind of right. It wasn't just a phishing email. The hackers themselves had to have 3 parts to make this attack work. One, they either needed to have an agent ID that was either already registered with the Kaseya server that they were going to compromise. Keep in mind, it's not just one VSA server, right? All kinds of clients have their own unique, either on-prem or in cloud. So they had to hack multiple targets to make this work. And if they had that ID, whether they compromised another endpoint agent or whether they, created their own registered agent with that ID, they could exploit 2 vulnerabilities that were going to allow this attack to happen. The first one was this authentication bypass that they could get into VSA and execute commands with absolutely no credentials. Even if you had 2-factor turned on and logged on, they were going to be able to do it with this exploit. The second part of the attack is they had to upload a file and give it execution. And that file ran the commands directly within the VSA database. And so you could imagine when you're running in the VSA database, you have full, call it God mode access. And that's what they did with their God mode access. They uploaded some files. One set of the files was the actual payload. The other set of the files was to purge and delete the logs. And that's exactly what the hackers did. They pushed out mass ransomware pretending to be a Microsoft Defender file. The second set of the second task that they did was cleaning up their logs and activity. So it was fairly sophisticated because these were not just 1 0-day vulnerability, but 2 that they took advantage of to be able to do this incident.
And I mean, does that suggest that the attackers who are targeting RMM systems in general are getting more sophisticated, more advanced in what they do and how they do it? Can we expect to see more of these incredibly sophisticated kinds of exploits?
So the answer is yes and yes, meaning 1, they're getting better. I would argue most of the attackers who are doing these incidents, specifically, some people said Kaseya was the supply chain vulnerability, similar to SolarWinds, and that's not actually correct. Kaseya was a vulnerability in software that they then used the MSPs as the supply chain, the one-to-many relationship there. And so where I'm going with that is these attackers, generally speaking, know your product, know your RMM, especially the internals, better than you do. You could argue to be able to conduct the sophisticated attack, you had to know the internals as good as the system, the system architects and the software engineers at Kaseya. So yes, they're getting sophisticated. Yes, they're going to keep happening. But this isn't new. A lot of people forget back in 2019, Kaseya had a plugin that was vulnerable that allowed, the attackers to deploy GandCrab ransomware. which GandCrab is very linked. And a lot of people have done analysis to see that the GandCrab code in some of their sophistication was reused in some of the Revil attacks. So there could be arguments that maybe some of the same hacker affiliates and some of the same ransomware developers not only were responsible for the one in 2019, but also this one here in 2021.
So it's almost scary to think that like the nefarious out there kind of get specialized in cracking a very particular brand of software and kind of stick within that wheelhouse and reuse their code to make new exploits for the same software. It's almost like you have a resume for that.
It's specialization for sure. And even though it didn't happen this incident, a lot of the time these very specific cyber criminal groups get into MSPs. They not only know your RMM, but they also know, generally speaking, how does your tech stack work? Meaning like, can I get into your backups? And they know how to log into your backups. They know if it has two-factor or not, and they know how to be able to delete your backups to be able to maximize payment. Another thing that we found out they're, astonishingly great at is not just the tech geek stuff. They actually know finances really well, meaning they know how to target your accounting system. We've actually seen some incidents that they include when the hackers ask for a ransom amount, not only show you a screenshot of your bank account, they show you your P&L statements, and they'll sometimes even include a cyber insurance policy that says, we know you're going to have to, are covered up to $2 million, so you're going to pay us. So it's not just the tech stack that they're getting better at. They're getting much better at the sophistication of their business operations as well.
The last time I saw you actually, which was in Orlando just 2-3 weeks ago, you showed me some screenshots of exactly that, and it was like the victim of a ransomware attack said, hey, we can't afford to pay this. And the response from the attacker was a screenshot of their cyber insurance policy. Yes, you can. It's just something else.
Seems like we need a hardware-based defense to kind of give us warning when we're being hacked. So maybe you could set up a system that looks like it's really important in your MSP business, and then like link it to like a toaster. So that way, if the system gets hacked, the toaster turns on and toast pops up, and then you're in trouble.
What's beautiful? Like you're actually, Matt, you're not too far away from, like most people don't know, like when you pay a ransomware actor, you don't just only can negotiate for the decryptor. You can sometimes negotiate to get your data back, or more obscure things that most people don't know is you can negotiate to get an actual write-up. How did you get into my network? How would you harden it? And multiple times these actors have actually provided full-on write-ups. And what's wild, Matt, is some of the recommendation in multiple of these write-ups where you should use a hardware tape-based backup solution because I wouldn't have been able to delete it. Or nowadays, some people use the word immutable, meaning like you can't actually modify it. Or for instance, if you log into the cloud service and you delete those backups, they actually go into a recycle bin that the attackers themselves cannot even delete. Kind of like that hardware, solution you were describing, that the only thing that will delete those backups is time. So it's, you might've been joking, but you're actually closer to right than you had expected.
We kind of joked last week because we were talking about having a hardware-based backup solution. I said, you know what, we should bring back floppy disks, right? Because that way I could buy stock in floppy 3.5-inch floppy disks, because every company would have to buy like 6 trillion of them in order to back up all their data. That's a business model right there.
That is, that's what is that? When you own both sides of it. Not only do you own the attackers, if the attackers were really sophisticated, they would give the recommendations to buy the floppies, and then they would hedge their bets and win on that side as well.
This is it. I'm making my investments tomorrow. Rich, go ahead. What other direction did we want to take this here?
Well, I would like to kind of take it into the MSP direction a little bit. Kaseya, for obvious reasons, won't go anywhere near the topic of what. So, I mean, thousands of VSA users get impacted by this attack. But like you said, only 50 to 60 of them were successfully breached and had their end users ransomed. Kaseya, for obvious reasons, won't talk about what those 50 or 60 companies may or may not have had in common. I'm wondering if you're aware of anything that may be true about those compromised MSPs that made them especially vulnerable to this attack.
We don't have a smoking gun yet, but we do have what we would use. We sometimes use the words low, medium, and high confidence. I would say we have a pretty medium confidence solution. Like for instance, to do this attack against at least on-prem, because that's what our team analyzed, that code base. We don't have any access into if Kaseya's cloud-based code base is different. But for the on-prem servers, you had to have, remember I said the very first thing you had to have is this either registered agent or an agent ID from a compromised machine. So one thing we've considered is maybe these 60 or so VSA servers publicly had the agent downloader on the website and allowed the attacker to pre-register a valid agent ID so they could use that valid agent ID to bypass that authentication that I mentioned. Or there is a chance that these hackers, because it does act as a marketplace on the dark web, you can sell data. And so it's not abnormal. Like the people who are usually doing the broad attacks aren't usually the ones who initially gain access. They sometimes buy these like agents and buy compromised hosts from a broker. And there is always the chance that maybe there's a broker that was gathering, I have this many computers that have among the data on them a Kaseya VSA agent that they could have extracted the configurations to be able to do it. So where I'm going is this attack was not possible unless you had some bit of information, whether it was you using the agent installer and getting the information that way, or you compromising one of their VSA victims and getting that unique ID. Without it, it couldn't happen. And that's the only thing we've been able to hypothesize that would have prevented this from being larger en masse. Keep in mind, Kaseya's code base, they may know better. We don't truly know. We haven't seen anybody that was impacted in the SaaS solution. So we're taking it by their word that there was nobody. But that's where, Huntress medium confidence speculation would be. Maybe they just didn't have enough of those, unique agent IDs to be able to conduct the full exploit.
So two further sort of related relevant topics. I mean, one is, what should somebody do if their RMM system is the next one to get compromised? And then what can you do to prevent yourself from getting compromised by that kind of an attack in the future? Let's start with the first of those, because Huntress has posted some material on this in the past. What do you do if your RMM system gets hit? And we can link to that from the show notes for this episode. But I mean, maybe give folks some highlights. If it's your turn next to have something like this happen to you, what are the things that you should do as an MSP, right away?
Yep. We all know, it's not if, it's when. Everybody says that nowadays. I am seeing some MSP partners go as far as saying, I'm leaving Kaseya because they got compromised and they're going to get compromised again. I will also caveat, almost all, if not all, the RMM vendors have had a security issue like this where code could have been ran remotely, including Microsoft. Microsoft has remote code execution vulnerabilities. It can happen to anyone. If it does happen to you, regardless of who you're running on, the mistakes that the geeks that usually operate, like, let's be real, most MSPs are operated by former tech folk, right? They said, working for these people, this is the worst. I'm going to go start my own business. And they create an MSP, which means they're savvy in tech, but not necessarily the business administrative. And that's obviously just broad strokes there. And that could be wrong. But generally speaking, of over 100 of these mass ransomware incidents where I've directly worked with over 100 MSPs who had ransom deployed or encryptors deployed to all their clients, there's three things in common that happen over and over and over. The first one, which is the one I really want to stress, is your very first phone call when this happens should be to your legal team. If you don't have in-house counsel, or you do have in-house counsel, but they're not prepared to give you, like if you're not 1,000% sure they know how to respond to this, your legal team should be hiring a breach coach. So call number one goes to your legal team. If you have no clue where to start, and for some reason you have no legal team and you find yourself in this situation, call number two should be to your insurance firm. A lot of people don't know, but insurance firms nowadays actually operate as kind of breach coaches, breach navigators, breach organizers per se, meaning they will put you in contact with the legal team. They will hire you a breach coach. They will give you recommendations and talk tracks on how to message this and what to say and what not to say. And they'll often have their own incident response team that works with them that they will deploy either remotely or physically to your location to be able to make that decision. So if step number one was call your lawyers and step number two was call your effectively your insurance company. Hopefully you have cyber insurance. If you don't, it's 2021. It's time to invest. Your final step that almost everybody gets wrong is we are all geeks and we all are capable of doing great technical things like responding to incidents. But when a breach happens, which by the way, you don't use the word breach, you use the word incident. Breach means something legally in most states. But when that incident happens, you call outside incident response. And the reason for this is not that they can do what you can also do. No, of course, that's a benefit, but they are that independent third party that if you ever go to litigation, it's great to be able to say, yes, we might have been partially responsible for this incident because it was our software. And even though we have the skills to remediate it, we still brought in an external independent third party to make sure, it's the checks and balances, the trust but verify. And those are the three things that within your first handful of minutes, everybody gets wrong. Maybe if we have time on the back end, Matt or Rich, we could talk about the three things nobody does right either. If those were what you get wrong, there's often three things that you miss, but I'll leave it up to you guys if we want to dive into that. The things that you miss are almost a little bit more seedy, a little bit more fun too.
Here I was thinking your third call would be to the local bar to see how late they're open.
Oh, you're thinking I'm joking, but I told you I had three seedy things that nobody does. One of those is, are you feeding and actually taking care of your team? And sometimes that means if you can't do anything, why don't you go grab a 6-pack of beer, maybe not chug them all, but go relax. Like these incidents really are, they're a marathon. They're not a sprint. And I can't tell you how many people think that they can just work through the night and make it go away. Like you'll be working an issue if this happens to you, probably no less than 2 weeks straight, and more realistically dealing with the fallout for at least 6 weeks.
That's a long time. Well, and while we're on the other, so what are the other two that people get wrong?
Funny one, shower schedules. And showers mean so much more than that, but you will not believe, like you start to perspire when this goes down. The team, right? A bunch of sweaty dudes and, guys and gals together stressing. Shower schedules usually align with sleep schedules, and that goes back to burnout. Folks, if you don't do those things right, if there's anything you can do by your team is make sure you put them on a good sleep and a shower schedule. It'll just do wonders for everybody. And the very last one, believe it or not, is most of the time, nobody thinks of the spouses. Notice these happen over holiday weekends. How many people do you think during this holiday, especially for US where it was the 4th of July, how many people do you think had to probably cancel like a vacation? I bet there was definitely more than one. I'm aware of one.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, they always do long weekends, holiday weekends.
Yep.
When people are distracted.
So like calling the spouse or the things that like are extensions of taking care of your spouse. Like if you don't have any kids, can you sign an NDA with your company and maybe your spouse can help, answer phones and read off a script that gives extra surge capacity that brings them into the fold? It's a heck of a lot better than him or her sitting at home for the next 6 weeks, wondering where the heck you are and why you're working these hours. It brings them into it. If you got kids, take care of your spouse, whether it's him or her, and maybe you call in the in-laws or figure out how you're going to bring in some extra babysitting, because these are the things like only after 100+ events do you realize that these are the things that really matter. You're not going to lose all your clients. To be honest, most of our MSP partners lose less than 15% of their clients, even with the incident where everybody's encrypted. But the things that happen are people get burnt, people's spouse relationships really get taken for a run. And to be honest, even employees start getting burnt out. We see an increased amount of like turnover where employees quit because they just don't believe this is going to be sustainable because they were probably running this like a sprint instead of a marathon. So yeah, that would be my 6 best practices.
Do you have like a test for when you're too smelly in a group? Do you have like the sure, unsure test,
I was thinking about it like half the time. I think some of the shirts that I've seen in our own team could probably stand up on their own, but that gets a little bit gnarly if you have to do that test. You could probably see the ring test if I really have to get sophisticated on this. If, the rings extend more than like 3 to 5 inches, it's time for, showers.
Count the rings. How far are you into the remediation response? Just count the rings.
Oh gosh, it's like trees in age, right?
Yeah. That's awesome. I love it. So I'll get us. I got one question. I'm gonna save that question for a little bit later. But let's talk a little bit more about MSPs specifically. So we now have another. We've been talking on the show for at least a couple of years about the threats that are out there that could eventually target MSPs as kind of like keys to the kingdom, right? And the tools that they use. And now we're really seeing that full force. We're seeing more MSPs targeted, more of the tools MSPs use, because it's, if you can hack an MSP, I mean, you're essentially hacking all of their clients as well. Should MSPs be worried that this is going to be happening at an even greater frequency going forward? And what can they do to kind of help prepare themselves?
Yeah, so I'm an old school, like coming out of my intelligence background, we tend to calculate risk on two major factors, right? One, there's got to be an actor out there with the capability, which in this case, they did indeed have an exploit. The other one is the motivation or intent, right? Because, for instance, we have, nukes in the US, but we use them as deterrents. We don't have the intent. We don't want to go bomb anybody. We're not savages, or at least, historically, we've tried not to be savages. Actors, though, have always had if you think about hackers, of course, they've always had the intent to target MSPs because they are a beautiful one-to-many supply chain. And that intent sometimes is amplified by awareness. However, remember that first one, they got to have capability. So as more and more folks, and I will be brutally honest, I looked at the code base to create this, and our team fully recreated the exploit. Keep in mind, we're kind of at the top tier of this exploit game. We do this for a career. And John Hammond and Caleb, who created the exploit at Huntress, they recreated this in 2 evenings. Cradle to grave, they could do the full attack. That means that bar was probably pretty low. And to be honest, we have, an issue that needs to be seriously discussed amongst MSPs is the quality of the code that we're trusting. Because keep in mind, intent is clear. We know for 18, 19, 20, and 21, we as MSPs have been used for supply chain attacks. We know the intent is there. But the capability, and it's turned out oftentimes, a lot of times vendors have been notified of vulnerabilities and haven't quite patched them. That was the ConnectWise Managed Sync plugin for Kaseya VSA in 2019. That actual vulnerability sat on GitHub for almost 2 years before hackers found it who had the intent, and then capability matched intent, and boom, it went down. We can't get away with these taking forever to patch bugs. And I'm not saying it turned out that the Kaseya issue, it looks like they were notified back in April by the Dutch Institute of Vulnerability Disclosure. That sounds much more official than it is. What this is an awesome nonprofit group of security researchers trying to protect the internet, who in their own nonprofit time decided to look at this Kaseya product, found a vulnerability and reported it. Turns out one of those many vulnerabilities they reported was abused in part of this attack. So I think the bigger question that we have to ask here is not only if, risk, yes, the risk is there, and it's now increasing because there's more awareness, but it's also increasing because there's more capability. And I think we have a very large, bigger, broader discussion to discuss as vendors about application security. And it's no longer okay to just say, well, I had a pen test where that automated vulnerability scanner looked over it. That's not the same thing as secure code audits. And Huntress is starting asking, what should we do to move the community to be able to enforce, really put the pressure on both ourselves first, and obviously imply that to other vendors of, if we can share our public vulnerability and code audits, could that inspire other vendors to maybe do the same? It'll definitely increase trust when you can show you're finding vulnerabilities and you are putting these reports. We're having to ask ourselves as kind of a champion of the MSP community, what can we do to help raise the bar? Because right now, there really should be no reason for the level of, unsophistication that some of that vulnerability was for those to exist in 2021. So I know that was a mouthful, but did that answer that, Matt?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And so, I mean, that gets to, what the vendor community needs to do to start mitigating some of this risk. Are there any sort of recommendations, best practices for the MSPs in terms of better, hardening their environment, making it less likely that they get swept up in the next one of these big attacks? So
this is, I tend to like polarizing moments because, worst case scenario, you divide everybody and you've won 50% of the audience if you truly were polarizing. But this comment that I'm about to make does meet that definition, which is a lot of us put a lot of credence into things like I'm SOC 2 certified, or I have these processes in place. And we tend to conflate those with I'm secure. That just means we have a well-established, hopefully well-executed plan that when something happens, we can respond. That is not security. That's very similar to, like, I've done deployments to Afghanistan. We would have well-established processes to patrol the base, right? Or the forward operating base. But as soon as somebody drove that, vehicle-borne IED to the front gate and blew it up, we would all agree that the base was not as secure as it was moments ago. So where I'm really going with this is, it's not enough just to ask, show me your SOC 2, show me your audits. I think we're going to have to go a step further and say, show me the actual vulnerability disclosures. I don't know if that's actually feasible, by the way. That's a level of transparency most businesses are not comfortable with, because it's really airing out your dirty laundry. But maybe to be the first, like Huntress has these audits, and we ourselves, even as professional exploiters and security researchers, find our own vulnerabilities, and other like third-party researchers find vulnerabilities in our code, and we quickly fix them. And I'm starting to realize that I should probably start putting my own vulnerability notices out there in public to maybe show other vendors that it's okay to air your dirty laundry. Everybody, oops, right? Everybody makes a mistake.
So let's take this conversation in a very polarizing direction, because I know that was definitely polarizing, and I think you're right. We should probably do that. However, let's really divide the audience here, Kyle. Miracle Whip or mayonnaise is better on a sandwich? Go.
Ooh, gosh, Miracle Whip or mayonnaise. I grew up on Miracle Whip. But I think I was stationed in the UK, and I think mayonnaise, took over. There wasn't too many that were. I mean, technically, isn't Miracle Whip a salad dressing, anyways?
I think that's what it says on the jar. Although I would never put that on a salad. Would you?
No, I do know that. My general rule of thumb is what food spoils faster is usually the one that I want. Like, my kids did a test for a science project one time that they let ice cream, the little ice cream sandwiches out in the sun. And one of them, I get no endorsement from Fat Boy ice cream or whatever, but that thing melted right away. It was clearly a premium thing. And I think our Walmart version of it, an hour later, and it didn't even have like dairy product leaking from it. It was still in shape. So with that said, my Miracle Whip versus mayonnaise, I think I heard because of the eggs, mayonnaise spoils quicker. So that's where I'm going, polarizing as it gets.
So, 50% of the audience doesn't agree with you and is up in arms. But Rich, have you ever put Miracle Whip on a salad?
No, not once. I don't think I even have, anything but Miracle Whip currently in my refrigerator, but hopefully, right. I think where we're going, right, is, even with these polarizing things, there's probably a lot of backing. Like, I think it is very controversial to show these vulnerabilities, but I hope when we normalize these things, we can agree both Miracle Whip and mayonnaise are actually pretty okay sandwich alternatives. So they're definitely better than a dry sandwich, and hopefully code auditing and airing out some of our dirty code laundry can help bring some reassurance, because I think as vendors, it's 2021. There is no way after this last incident, which was on the front page of BBC, Yahoo, obviously all the major, media outlets, and of course, some of the awesome channel coverage as well. We're not getting away with crappy code anymore. And it's going to impact business.
Just out of curiosity, I mean, the one of the eye-catching statistics in this whole thing was the $70 million that these, REvil was asking for to get that universal decryptor. And we have no reason to believe they have gotten that money or negotiated something approaching that amount. But does the simple fact that that number is now out all over the place in the media, and there are other potential attackers thinking, wow, this could be a tens of millions of dollars kind of payoff if I get things right. I mean, does that create even more risk for, RMM software makers, IT management software makers, MSPs?
Yeah, we're seeing the, just like how you get inflation within a market, you're seeing inflation amongst ransomware payments. And I'm aware of many $5 million ransomware payments that were made, by the way. They didn't start at 5 million. They usually start at like 15 or 12, and then they get down to somewhere like, 5. But I'm also aware of one, greater than $10 million payment. So I'm not aware of any $70 million payments, but we'll see, right? I think at minimum, the hackers might, even if they get paid 15 on this, you could argue that my largest payment I'm aware of is in the low tens. And that would help normalize that this is a normal paying rate for some businesses. So I think no matter what, even if they don't get paid, the hackers are going to, accomplish their goal, which is they're raising the stakes. You might not feel so bad next time they ask for 5 million. At least it wasn't 70, right?
Right. Well, I mean, so if we stop paying them all together, would we eventually stop seeing ransomware?
Oh, I love that. It's another good polarizing. I am the first, by the way, to say, if you pay these actors, you're only going to incentivize them to do more. And even some of the actors say, like, with us, you get a guarantee we won't hack you again with that particular vulnerability. That's a real thing, by the way, screenshots and everything. And what happens is that affiliate just goes to another ransomware group and then hacks you again. But despite that, like, really, hey, I would never do it. I am the first, I'll be real. I won't pay and support kidnappings either until you kidnap one of my kids, and I'm going to be the first that gives in. So I think it's real easy to be the tough guy or gal and say, like, no, never, I'm never going to pay that. When it's your business that's on the line and the only way you can get your system back up and running, you're going to pay. And I know this because I'm usually talking to, think about the demographic of most MSPs, late 50s, early 60s, usually white male. I can tell you from t-shirt sizes, usually they're XL to 2X. And they're usually in this moment when they're getting the payment and having to do it, you're usually on the brink of crying when they, fork over that $1 to $2 million ransomware payment. That sometimes it's covered by insurance and sometimes it's not, especially with the Treasury situation where they've said, hey, this could be, outlawed. Or you start talking about, are you paying ransoms to terrorists with some of the new, Biden administration verbiage? It's rough, but in that moment, I understand why people pay.
Yeah. Well, we got time for one more question. I'm going to take it. So let me ask you, we talked a little bit about things that people do wrong or often get wrong. Tell us a story about maybe a couple of things you've seen that have gone right, that people did right. Let's end on a positive note.
No, I like this because, to be honest, there could have been a lot more glass half full in the media than there was. And I actually think there was some points with this Kaseya situation that all of us should take away. The first one is we're not in it alone. Groups like the CompTIA ISAO, being able to help each other out, being able to help, even if they couldn't have a technical security role and really understand the vulnerability, being able to use that group to find other MSPs that were willing to help MSPs that were compromised. Within 20 minutes, we went online at 2 a.m. Eastern time. One of a partner in New Zealand was compromised. We found somebody that was willing, that was right there, 30 miles away from this partner, that was willing to provide 2 technicians in the middle of the night. For us, it was daytime for them, but that happened in about 20, 25 minutes. That's huge. Talk about collaboration. I think, if the ransomware groups, cyber criminals can collaborate, why aren't we doing this better as a group? So big hats off. I think we're just getting started with what the CompTIA ISAO and other things could be. I think we could have done more. But you got to crawl before you walk and you got to walk before you run, right? Other major things that we did, the amount of community outpour, specifically in messaging. I saw people that not only were offering help, but they were offering words of encouragement. And I think that sounds so sappy when you haven't been in this incident. But I can tell you that the one thing internally that we do probably better than just about anybody is when somebody has an incident, we tend to send them food, right? We cater a couple meals for that MSP. We tend to have about an hour-long call that we call cyber therapy internally. It's just to help them reassure that things are going to be okay. And what's beautiful is there's been enough compromised MSPs that have gone through this before. I actually saw them on the forums. I saw them in Reddit saying, I've been through this before. It's going to feel terrible. Let me reassure you, my 5 million ARR MSP at the end of this was still a $4.5 million MSP at the end of it. You're going to make it through. It's not going to be big. You're not going to have to lay people off. What an awesome, that's epic, right? That is absolutely epic. And maybe the last kudos that we'll give with this thing is security vendors and security researchers within the MSP community are starting to collaborate much better. Our internal company mantra is our offense is your defense, meaning we take an offensive approach to defense. And I'm already seeing the beginnings, right? I don't think anybody's going to hack back or break any laws or anything like that, but I'm seeing much better coordination, much better forensics gathering, much better information sharing. I think it's quite likely as this continues to ramp up, we'll start weaponizing our own technicians, and maybe we see some court cases where some of these ransomware authors actually end up in jail because of the forensics and the things that we've done as a community to combat them. So that's my glass half full. And I hope that was the positive note we were looking for.
Well, if we were going to end on a positive note, seeing the nefarious people who have done all this go get their, I'm going to use the expression, get their comeuppance. That is definitely a high note to end on. So Kyle, thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, Kyle Hanslovan, CEO of Huntress. Kyle, if people wanted to learn more about Huntress, learn more about the things you do, or get in touch with you, how can they do that?
Gotcha. I mean, good old fashioned huntress.com, right? We're a non-stingy, non-salesy team. We'll answer your questions if you hit support@huntress.com, whether you're a partner or not. It's a good place to start.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again for being on, and I look forward to having you back on again in the future. Even if we don't have another massive attack that we have to discuss, maybe to talk about more positive things, like better condiments to put on sandwiches than mayo and Miracle Whip. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to finish off the show with some of our regular end of the show features and have a little bit of fun. You won't miss it. Stick around. We'll be right back. All right, and we are back with part 3 here of this episode of ChannelPro Weekly. Great interview with Kyle Hanslovan. I really appreciate him coming on to talk to us. Rich, there's a lot to dive in there, and we got some even exclusive information. Any other highlights you want to point out?
I mean, the whole conversation was really insightful and interesting. You know, I think the thing that may have made the biggest impression on we were actually talking earlier in the podcast about things that you can do from a technical standpoint to prepare yourself for this kind of situation when, not if, it happens to you. And I think the piece of that I know I certainly have not been thinking about enough is what Kyle was talking about when he said, you know, think about the sleep schedule and showering, and I mean and your spouse. It's like the emotional and the physical impact of this kind of incident is very real and very serious, and that needs to kind of factor into your incident response plan as well. So you got to have a plan, but think about, you know, how are you going to be able to sustain that response, because it's going to be intense potentially for quite a long time. Yeah, agreed. Yeah, insightful stuff. Great stuff. And hopefully, Antwine, the next time we have you back, you can join us for the interview as well with whoever we're talking to that week. But yeah, sorry you weren't able to be a part of that. But what you can be a part of something else, and that is a fun round of 5 questions. Antwine, do you know what 5 questions are?
Not familiar, but I'm looking forward to it. Let's go. All right. So 5 questions. So for those who have never, maybe for the first time listening or watching, 5 questions is a little game Rich and I play usually here at the bottom of the show, where we are required to think of 5 questions off the top of our head. We are not allowed to really think about them in advance. We're not allowed to write them out in advance. It has to be off the top of our head, which means sometimes the questions are a little strange. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, but it's a lot of fun. No gotchas, nothing to embarrass you. Like, we're not asking that kind of stuff, but definitely off topic and definitely things to learn a little bit more about you. You ready? Ready.
All right, Rich. I will give the first question. One of these that, you know, I tend to give you the first question a lot these days. I'm gonna give it to you this time, but I think next time I'm taking the first question, but you can have it this time.
Well, thank you. I have been wondering about this for quite some time. Is, you know, are you being too generous? But no, I appreciate that. And yeah, anytime you want, step in with the first question. I'm just going to take all 5 questions next time and stick my tongue out at you the whole time. You can do that too. I have worked up, you know, or you've worked up a deficit that you are entitled to, you know, make that up.
Time to pay up. All right, go ahead, Rich.
So, you know, I write about MSPs, Antwine, but I don't typically, you know, feel the temptation to like become one. I'm very interested in what you folks do, but don't necessarily want to accept. The one exception to that maybe was when you did a video case study for us a few years back about some point of sale work that you did with a chain of biscuit restaurants in the Raleigh. And I remember thinking to myself, yeah, working with a biscuit company, having the opportunity to eat biscuits on a regular basis as part of the job, that actually sounds, because I love biscuits, real Southern biscuits. You can go the sweet direction with those, or the savory, the biscuit with gravy direction. Do you have a preference?
Oh, I'm definitely biscuits with gravy. And yeah, they are one of the most fantastic franchises to work with. My wife, who's now vegan, she's been vegan for a couple of years. She definitely judges me whenever I have to go fix something at that client site, because she knows I'm not sticking to our vegan diet at home. So.
Awesome. All right. Well, I will take question number 2. Your martial arts background fascinates me. In fact, when this show is over, I guarantee I'm going to be on like YouTube trying to see if there's any videos of some of your matches that I could watch. But I did martial arts myself for a long time when I was a long time ago when I was younger, and I did some matches, did some sparring, and I remember a couple matches that stood out in my head that I still remember to this day, where I'm like, I'm not going to come out on top on this one, but I ended up on top. Tell us about like the match you're most proud of.
So this was actually the year I had medaled at US Open. So I was coming off of a very bad like losing streak. Like I literally lost first round at like every tournament, went to Dallas, went to New York, went everywhere. So right before US Open, I actually fought a tournament in New York, and luck of the draw, I fought heavyweight. So at the time, and this guy I fought, he was like, 6'13". He was massive. And I remember, competing against him, I scored on him, but I lost miserably. So my coach gives me a hard time. He's like, that guy wasn't even that good. What's wrong with you? Blah, 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 blah. Fast forward to 6 months later, he's carrying the Olympic flag for Mali. And my coach looks at me, because we're both watching the Olympic opening ceremonies, and he goes, wow, I guess that guy wasn't that bad after all. So that was probably one of the best matches that I lost. But actually a match that I was proud of that I came out on top of was quarterfinals of US Open. I actually had to compete against someone who had medaled at Pan Am's. They got in bronze, and for the first time ever, my coach told me before that match, good luck. And it really scared me, because he always says, create your own luck. He doesn't believe in luck, and he tells me good luck. So I was like, is this going to be the end for me? But I actually came out on top and lived to fight another day. So no, those are two probably, really awesome times that I had in competition.
Awesome. Yeah. Great stories. Love that. Rich, question 3 to you.
So, Raleigh is where ChannelPro headquarters is located. Matt and I aren't there, but there are some members of the ChannelPro team in Raleigh, including Michael Siggins, our boss, the publisher of the magazine. And I remember years and years ago asking him, what is like the football team in Raleigh, that, the NFL team that people root for? And it was like a really interesting answer, because he said it's all over the map. Like there's this whole kind of Steelers contingent here and a Panthers contingent and so on. So I mean, what's your team?
Well, once again, I have to default to what my wife likes, and my wife's from Maine, so she's a New Englander. And so we are, Patriots fans. And then of course we also root for Tampa Bay, because of a certain quarterback. But yeah, and they are my in-laws are very big Patriot fans. So that is who I roll with.
So when we see you in October in Raleigh, we'll have to bring this up with Michael, because Michael has been living in Raleigh for a long time now, but he lived in Boston even longer than that earlier. So he's a serious Patriots fan. He will be pleased to know there's somebody else in Raleigh who's a hardcore Patriots fan. And then we'll also have to introduce you to Colleen Fry, who lives in the Boston area now, our ChannelPro's managing editor. And she wants nothing to do with the quarterback of that team. She has said many, many times, he is dead to her now. So yeah. You guys can kind of discuss that.
In our engagement photos, we're wearing Tom Brady jerseys, and our dog, Oscar, is wearing a Patriots jersey. So Yeah, I am all in.
And of course, Rich, we'll need to invite Daisy Shelley into that conversation, so
Yeah.
so we can just make it super contentious and have everybody argue. Who is not a Patriots or Tom Brady fan at all. So that would be a fun discussion to have. All right, question number 4 to me. All right, you mentioned earlier that you like to take the Noah's Ark approach to things. So let's actually put you in Noah's position. You are Noah, and you are about to load the Ark, but you can only save yourself and one species of creature on this planet, 2 of them. What creature do you save?
Oh, I mean, Oscar's got to make that ride with me. He's my loyal best friend, you know, even though now we have a 9-month-old and he's our second baby. But yeah, we got to save the dogs. And, you know, oh man, second creature. That one's going to be tough. I mean, you know, we'll go something crazy off script. How about a llamas? The llamas are cool, right? I'm into that.
So after the floods, you know what? Actually, I bet if we broke that down, that's probably not a bad choice, because can you milk llamas? Rich, you know a lot about llamas, right?
Yeah, of course I do. Yeah, no, I don't know actually if you can milk llamas, but you know there's wool, there's llama wool, so you can make.
You could shear them.
Yeah,
you could probably eat them. I mean, you can eat just about anything, right? You might be able to milk them.
There might be
can you ride a llama?
You know, there might be a plant-based version. Yeah, you know, so I'm hopefully going to be living off the leaves if Jessica's with me on this Ark journey, and the llama's going to be our pet. You know, no llamas were harmed during this recording.
Love it. All right, Rich. I don't know if we can get any more ridiculous than that, but let's see what you got. Question 5 to you.
Yeah, I'm not going to be able to top that as far as ridiculous goes, but just in case we actually don't see you again until October. So we're coming to Raleigh, your hometown. What is the one thing we need to make absolutely certain that we do in Raleigh before Matt and I go home?
Well, you know, if hockey season is around, I'd say check out a Canes game. But I do think that, you know, you need to get a chance to check out some of the food in Raleigh. I mean, we're very lucky to have, you know, such a really good food presence here, and, you know, some really talented chefs, you know, even though we're always considered this small town. I think Raleigh's up and coming. I think the downtown area is very vibrant and growing. So I would say, you know, have a little Sunday fun day. Hit me up. I'm always looking for a reason to hang out.
Awesome.
I love it. And I love hockey, by the way. So I'm up for any kind of hockey game that I can get to. So that's fun stuff. Although I follow more of the AHL side of the hockey. Longtime listeners know I'm a big Ice Hogs fan, because that's a team near me. But I'd love to get to a Canes game. That would be fun. You like hockey, Antwine? You a big hockey fan?
I've become one, you know, over time. But yeah, I mean, I really enjoy going to Canes games. Actually, you know, one of my colleagues here at the office, she is probably the biggest Canes fan. So anytime I get an opportunity to give tickets, it is disrespectful for me not to offer her the tickets first, you know, because I feel like such a poser. But no, I am now becoming a hockey fan. So.
Oh, awesome. Fun stuff. Well, that might be something we can do while we're in Raleigh. Rich, we might have to get out there a little early. All right. Well, fun stuff. Thank you for playing along. It was really, really interesting thing. I have a lot of research to do on llamas to see if that really is a good choice. If it's the only species you can save. Might be. You might be smarter than you think, Antwine. So we'll check into that. Rich, if you were going to tell us what we might have missed, and there's a lot of stuff we might have missed because we didn't really do a show last week. Lots to catch us up on there. And what might we see in the weeks ahead?
Well, if you want to see the stuff that you may have missed, I highly recommend that you read our weekly In Case You Missed It post. It goes up on our website, channelpronetwork.com, every Friday. We are recording this episode a little bit earlier in the week than we normally do, so it's a little unclear to me what kinds of news stories that our own James Gaskin will be writing about. this week. But I can tell you that there is a ton more news out of Microsoft Inspire than we spoke about on the show here, or that I will get a chance to write about this week. So we're going to have more news from Inspire for you. Ivanti, the IT management company, will have announced another acquisition in the security realm by the time you're listening to this, and James will have the lowdown on all of that for you. Looking ahead to next week, the ASCII group is doing its next event in Chicago, your backyard there, Matt. And the IT Nation Evolve peer groups are having their latest quarterly meeting. And in conjunction with that, in honor of that, our interview guest next week, Matt, is Arlen Sorensen, who created the HTG peer group organization that is now IT Nation Evolve. We'll be talking with him about peer groups and some other managed service related topics. And by the way, our guest host next week will be our good friend Eric Long, who we saw in Dallas recently.
Oh, I always love having Eric on. He's a lot of fun. Do you think he'll be in his RV, or do you think he'll be in a house?
That's a good question. When we saw him in Dallas, he was staying at his home in Dallas, but it's been a few weeks. We'll see.
You never know where he's going to be, folks. You'll have to tune in to find out. And how can you do that? You subscribe to the ChannelPro Weekly podcast. Everywhere podcasts are aggregated, we're on pretty much all of them. If you find one we're not on, let us know. Podcast@channelpronetwork.com is the email address, and we'll make sure that we get it added there for you as well. Of course, if you have any comments, questions, suggestions, whatever it is, we want to hear them. Podcast@channelpronetwork.com again is the email address. Feel free to reach out for us there. If you're watching on YouTube, you can use that comment box below, hit the like button, and leave your comments there for us to check out. We love those. And of course, subscribe to us on YouTube as well. Hit the red button and the bell. And I don't know, there's like 4 steps to subscribing to some stuff on YouTube now, but do all those, and then you'll be able to check us out on YouTube as well. ChannelProNetwork.com is the website to go each and every day. Set it as your homepage. That way you get all the latest news, articles, white papers, downloads, resources, information, stuff that will help you make money and make you better at your job. And that's what we are here to do. So do that as well. Follow us on the socials and so on and so forth. And of course, a big thank you to Antwine Jackson from Enitech for joining us today. It was Antwine, it was great having you on. The time just flew by, man. Did you have a good time?
Oh, I had a great time, and I hope to be a part of this, again. So this is awesome.
Oh, love to have you back for sure. And for those who want to maybe reach out to you and get to know you better and learn more about what Enitech does, how can they get a hold of you?
Oh, well, you can always look us up, www.enitechsolutions.com. My name is actually not very super common, so you probably can find me on social media pretty easily. Antwine, like Antwine. I'd love to get my follower game up, so follow me on social or LinkedIn.
And if anybody wants to do a sparring match with you, are you up for it?
Probably not. I'm not in the fighting shape that I used to be, but I would be more than happy to bow out to that person.
So if you want a sparring match with Antwine, you've got to be also out of shape. We'll just put it that way. No martial arts for at least 5 years preceding.
Correct. I'm gonna need some time to train.
Awesome stuff. Well, thank you again so much for being on, and I cannot wait to get you back. Big thanks to Rich for joining me as well, and we will see everybody in episode 193 next week. See you then.